Hey guys, it's Dani. Welcome to the rejuvenation process of the orchids which I purchased recently that spent no less than 35 days on transport. So I'm gonna take you through the process, share with you my thought process and all of that fun stuff. So before we start, let me remind you that you can actually like this video if you do end up enjoying it, and you can also subscribe. It is totally free and I post 3 times a week. So with that said, let's start with the first step of the rejuvenation process, which is rehydration. So before we start the repotting party, we need to let these guys drink a little bit before we go ahead and start messing around with their root system, stressing them out. Because if we start repotting them while they are stressed and very dehydrated, you can imagine that the shock will be even bigger. It is my experience that if orchids are already hydrated, when we repot them, they tend to bounce back a little bit faster. In this case, it might actually make the difference between a dead orchid and a healthy orchid. The only dude that we're gonna repot, just because he lost all of his medium, is this guy, the Bulbophyllum. Everybody else can first hydrate. And to do that, I'm going to use some decorative pots. Whatever containers that don't have any drainage hole, cups, whatever will do the job. I just happen to have a lot of these decorative containers, so I'm just gonna use these. Speaking about dehydration, I do get asked quite a lot of times, how should we go about rehydrating the orchids? Do we need to keep them soaking for a few days or overnight? Do we actually need to submerge the entire orchid? And well, the answer is no, and absolutely not. One thing you should never do is submerge an already super stressed orchid, especially if it has new growth, in water, because that will promote rotting. Definitely, we're not gonna shower the orchid, we're not gonna submerge it into anything. What we will do is water it a little bit more than usual. So I chose these containers because they can actually retain a little bit of water. So what I will do is just put a little bit of water at the bottom of these pots. The medium will absorb that water, but it will not be excessive. It will not be super soggy. What I'm doing here is pretty much normally watering these orchids. If any of these pots still have a lot of water left after a few hours, I am going to dump it out. See, this one needs a little bit more. What I'm doing here is just wetting the medium, nothing more. And because the medium is so dry, I want these containers without drainage to act like a little bit of a reservoir. And that's all there is to rehydration. It's not a special process that we need to do. I know that the more special and complex it sounds, the more you'd think you'll have results, but actually no, it's a very simple process. Give the roots water and air. That's all they need. All right, so a few days have passed and I can better see what I'm dealing with here. And well, the bad news is, some of these leaves will absolutely not make it. We can see that some orchids had a little bit more damage than I thought. The good news is the new growths, as you will see when I take them one by one, are a-okay. So I did not lose all of the new growths, which is great. So today I'm gonna repot these guys and let them adjust to my greenhouse and my way of doing things and continue the rejuvenation process. All right, so let's start with the Bulbophyllums. I like to pot my Bulbophyllums in shallower pots, which I cannot find. So what I use are just some sort of containers that I find at the grocery shop. They are microwavable containers. I don't think they are very good quality, so I try to protect these containers. I don't keep them in full sun, not that the Bulbophyllums need full sun, so it kind of works out. And my preferred medium is a combination between sphagnum moss and some bark chips. So let's go ahead and unpot these guys. By far the worst looking one is the Bulbophyllum Mastercianum. The tag actually says Masterianum, but I think that's wrong. I discovered while editing the other video with the unboxing. And I will just remove this sphagnum moss from the root system. Many of the roots are just not alive anymore. See, this little root here, this is a good one, but everything else, I can feel it, it's desiccated. If I pull on it, it leaves behind a string. Can we see? Yeah, these are not good. And it makes sense. It spent more than a month on transport. These roots got desiccated. Bulbophyllums don't actually like to dry out anyway, so it makes sense. But also I have quite a bit of damage on the leaves as well, and I will have to remove the leaves. But it's okay, because the growth, do you remember how yellow it was? It's not yellow anymore, it's green and nice, so it didn't suffer from any infection, it wasn't rotten, it was just lacking a little bit of chlorophyll. So I cut away all of the roots that I could clearly see were dead. I think I do still have a few of them. What I want to do though is kind of separate the old growth from the new growth. At this point, these very old pseudobulbs are not all that needed. We do have healthy pseudobulbs here. Furthermore, this leaf is not looking nice at all. It looks like it has an infection which can travel. So what I want to do is cut the rhizome right here, and I will discard this portion of the plant. Now, this doesn't mean that the leaves here are healthy, in no way, and I have to cut both of them completely because, see, the yellow wing reached the pseudobulb, so there's nothing I can actually do for them. But that's okay, the orchid will be sit back, it's absolutely fine. We do have a lot of energy stored in these pseudobulbs. So I will try to cut the leaf at the abscission line, which you can actually see here. Typically when the leaf falls off naturally, it will detach at this point. But what's happening here is not natural. This, I think, is an infection. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it right here. And this leaf, yeah, sadly I cannot really save much because it reached exactly this point. So I can cut this one right here as well. Okay, so now I'm gonna wash a little bit the root system, spray it with hydrogen peroxide, and come back to pot up the orchid. I don't actually remember if I said it earlier, I wanted to say it. Not only cutting the older part is beneficial because it was a little bit sick, but now my orchid fits much better in this pot, meaning it can spend more time in this pot, which translates into a longer time without having to disturb this orchid, which is great. So I will try to place the older side of the orchid towards the edge of the pot and the newer side towards the center. Alrighty, so the orchid is done. The last thing that I will do is place a little bit of cinnamon where I cut these leaves. Now, typically on the rhizome, I don't apply cinnamon because the rhizome is a very woody structure. It's not really all that moist and all that prone to having pathogen issues. But when we cut leaves and worse, pseudobulbs, it is a good idea to seal up a little bit these cuts. And they say cinnamon has some antifungal and antibacterial properties. To be fully honest, there is no way that I can test that, but it has served me well for the past 7 years, so you know what? Maybe it has. It certainly does help a lot with drying out. So the bulbophyllum is done. All I need to do is water it really well, and I'll come back with the next orchid. Next up, we have the wonderful Bulbophyllum medusae. Yet again, the new growth is not yellow anymore, it is green, it wasn't rotten, so I'm very happy. Also, the orchid is not all that dehydrated anymore. It still is, it's probably going to lose these two leaves, which are pretty old, but it's okay. I do believe this orchid will be just fine. So the process will be absolutely identical. I don't think there is anything new that I can show you with this orchid as well. Well, I thought there would be nothing to show you, but look at this. This pseudobulb was completely buried and it's full of mold and it's mushy and it smells so bad. Oh my goodness. So I'm gonna clean it up and spray the whole thing with hydrogen peroxide. And yes, I'm also going to cut away this pseudobulb, not the entire division. I really don't need this mushy pseudobulb. So I'm gonna go clean the roots really well, spray them, and come back when the orchid is clean. And ta-da! The medusa is potted as well. I actually ended up removing 2 more pseudobulbs, not because I wanted to necessarily, but because they were kind of dangling. They weren't really attached very well, so I just removed them. More space for the orchid. Now, before we move on, let me just address something really fast because I know it's gonna pop up in the comments. Oh my goodness, Danny, that orchid is over potted. No. Okay, so the pot size you use absolutely doesn't matter. What matters is what you put inside the pot. Because the problem with the pot is the bigger it is, the more water it will hold. And for a beginner, it is a very good idea to just say, hey, don't use too big pots because it's not gonna be okay. That advice kind of covers a whole area of mistakes you can possibly do. However, when you start to get a hang of things, you can start to break the so-called rules because you will know what you're doing. And just to prove my point, let's make a little imagination exercise. Let's imagine my orchid in the very same pot, but without any type of medium. Tell you what, let's flip the pot and let's imagine the orchid is right on top of this pot. Is it still overpotted? You might say, well, no, it's actually mounted on an ugly piece of plastic. Still mounted. And there you go. If I put an orchid in a completely empty pot, all of a sudden it's bare rooted, it's mounted, however you want to call it. The second I start to put medium in, it's potted and the problems begin. So, is the problem the pot size or the medium you put in that pot? And well, needless to say, if you know what type of medium to put in there and how to arrange it and how it works with your environment and the orchid you have, then you can do stuff like this without bad stuff happening. And if you're not convinced, I have a lot of videos of overpotted orchids, including Bulbophyllums. Did you see the daisy chain this month? Beautiful, isn't he? Next up, we have the Fascinator variety Semi-Alba. I called it an alba last time, but it's actually Semi-Alba. And I do believe one of the growths did not make it on transport. I don't know, it doesn't look all that great. But one of them did make it. So I will go about things in the exact same manner. And here we are, my little bulbos are all potted, and before we move on to the other two orchids, a few more ideas I wanted to mention. With all of these guys, I did use hydrogen peroxide 3%. It is part of my routine. I talked about it a lot, but if you're new to my channel, I will share with you down below in the description a video which talks about a lot of repotting tips. Amongst them is the hydrogen peroxide. So yeah, I did use with all of these guys. I don't want any snails. Also, most Bulbophyllums have a rather creeping nature and they can actually outgrow a pot super fast. So it really is a much more comfortable option to go for a shallow but wide container, whether it's transparent plastic as you can see here or something else. It really depends on your taste and how comfortable you are with not watching the roots. As for my containers, I poked holes in them with a soldering iron, which I use only for this purpose. And in this way, I created drainage and extra ventilation. As far as a decorative container goes, with my older Bulbophyllums, which are potted in the exact same type of container, I found these metal cache pots. I don't know if that's the way to call them at IKEA, but I think they discontinued them. So sadly, I will have to find a nice bowl of sorts, maybe from the grocery shop once again, because I highly doubt I will find decorative containers for this type of container. And as you can see with my little daisy chain here, these orchids can actually spread really fast. Once they take off and they have multiple directions of growth, they can outgrow a pot or a basket super fast. I doubt my new bulbos will do this very soon because they are sit back. They're also pretty tiny. This is an older Bulbophyllum, and yeah, as you can see, he is spilling over the pot already. I need to find myself a bigger bowl, but that's what's gonna happen with the other orchids as well. If you will, this is a little sneak peek into the future. I like it though. It's a very decorative plant, and when it blooms, it's beautiful. Oh, right, so I think we're gonna end this video here. It ended up being a almost 30-minute video, and that's a little too much. And by the way, if you hear noises outside, we have a windstorm, pretty much unannounced, and it completely ruined my terrace and my orchids. That's a different story. You're gonna hear about that. Oh my God. Did you hear that? That's scary. Anyway, so here is 3 weeks later. The Bulbophyllums are doing great. The one that was most affected, I think, is the Fascinator, because the new growth was not looking good. It ended up not making it, but I do have 2 new growths, one here and another tiny one just developing here. So they will be okay. And since we're at it, I'm gonna show you another bulbo that I have from a different seller, from Orchid Man. This is the Bulbophyllum Ambrosia, which is supposed to be very fragrant, very nice smelling. Weird for a Bulbophyllum, right? You guys are very amused, right? Joey Bird, tell me, what would you do outside during this storm, huh? Would you be able to fly or not? No, honey. Anyway, one of the things on my wish list was to get more Bulbophyllums, which I did this year. I certainly did not expect them to be on transport for a month, but since it happened, it is what it is. I think everybody will be okay though. And I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Hope you learned something new. This is the way that I go about rejuvenating any orchid. And in 7 years of figuring out how to rejuvenate and recover orchids, keeping it simple actually worked out the best. Saved time, saved money. You can see a trend in my videos. I don't do all sorts of concoctions. I don't use all sorts of additives. I actually genuinely, strongly believe they're not needed. Hence, I'm not gonna tell you to use all sorts of boosters if I myself don't use them. Why would I tell you to do that? Anyway, that's just my way of doing things. There's nothing wrong with doing things your way. And with that said, I just hope this video inspired you. And of course, I'll keep you up to date with the evolution of these orchids. Next part 2 actually, will be with the other orchids, and stay tuned for unboxing orchids that spent 100 days on transport. Not even joking. It's not clickbait. You're gonna see the thumbnail, you're gonna see the title. I assure you it's not clickbait. So that said, stay tuned for that, and I hope you have a great day. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And I'll see you all next time. Bye!